Did you know the LA Kings have their own culinary partner? It's Superfood, celebrating 10 years and over 1 million meals served. Since 2020, the Kings have trusted Superfood to fuel their players. Now through Simply Lunch, you can bring that same performance-driven food to your office. Because when people eat better, they work better. Visit mysuperfood.com. That's mysuperfd.com. Or call 213-973-6145. Qualified companies can enjoy a free lunch for up to 10 managers.
You're listening to All the Kings Men, the official podcast of the LA Kings. Now, here's your host, Jesse Cohen.
All right, we are reacting to the trade of Phil Danault to the Montreal Canadiens for the Columbus Blue Jackets second-round pick. Joining me, Zach Dooley. How are you doing today, Zach?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Fair. Zach joins me now. We are recording this Friday night.
I don't know.
Yeah.
We can't do that anymore.
Can't do that. Yeah, exactly. I got to change all the macros in my phone.
I guess we'll just have to fill some time.
We're recording at 9 o'clock, maybe 5 minutes after the Ken Holland media availability wrapped up. 3 minutes. I mean, basically immediately after.
Yep.
My biggest question going into the availability with Ken Holland, Zach, was this the first step of a roster rehaul, or is this the first step of a roster teardown? And after talking to Ken Holland, I'm not sure we necessarily have an answer. The answer we got, it feels like, was let's wait and see.
It's certainly not a roster teardown, but I definitely don't think it answers that it's, a makeover either, right?
Yeah.
I think you're right. It's a wait and see situation. For now, the Kings get a top 40-ish pick.
Yep.
From Columbus. They get an additional $5.5 million in cap space. And to use, I think, a point you use kind of in reverse, it's, when you sign a player in free agency, it's not just signing a player, it's also filling an opportunity for others. And now you kind of see the inverse of that, where you trade a roster player for a pick, and it's an opportunity for an Alex Turcotte, most likely, to play more. So look, I mean, I know you and I are both very fond of Phil Danault, personally and professionally. Both had really good relationships with him, and he did a lot here, very positively, even if this year I think the offensive production, not what was needed from him. It's an interesting move for sure. It's maybe not what I expected or what you expected or what we all might have expected there. But it also doesn't feel like the last move the Kings are going to make this year in one way or another.
I mean, gosh, there's so many ways to approach that.
Yeah.
So I'll just get the personal stuff out of the way. Yes, obviously, because I've had a bajillion text messages already, and I don't mean to be petty about it, but when people text me and are like, I'm so sad, I just want to say, yeah, how do you think I feel? Yes, totally. This is probably the player on the Kings that I've ever been the closest to, as terms of friendly, I like all the guys. I can chat with all of them, but yeah, I liked Phil, and I believe that Phil likes me. But as far as the interesting part to me, the personal part, the social part is not that interesting. What fascinates me is, when I said tear down, what I essentially meant was this team, everybody knew this trade was coming. Or a trade of Phil Danault, right? Maybe not the specific details. But
a lot of smoke, right?
Yeah, there had been tons of rumors. There had been reports that the player had requested a trade. He hasn't played in the last 4 games. Ken Holland addressed that directly, which he revealed a detail that I thought was interesting. And if PR had given more time for the call, I would have loved to have gotten into it. He mentioned that he talked to the agent about the player not going on the trip that included the games in Florida and Texas. I would love to know how common that is. If a player is sick and the team doesn't take the player in a setting where there aren't rumors about a player having demanded a trade, do you even need to talk to, why would you talk to the agent? So that was interesting to me.
And then also, I think, added that had a deal not come today,
yes,
Phil
he would
have
have
practice tomorrow, would have been in the lineup on Monday and Tuesday and Saturday against the Ducks. And then, they would have resumed trying to find
continue to evaluate. Sorry, I'm trying to kill a bug. So there were a lot of interesting details sort of sprinkled throughout, but the word that kept coming up that that is why I'm sort of nonplussed by this whole thing is evaluating, because Ken Holland mentioned it at the quarter pole season media availability. And he said it was immediately after, I think, the signing of Kempe's extension, right? And so the question then was, what's the next priority? Is it Clark's extension? Is it somebody else's extension? And he said the next priority is evaluation. And he talked about that a lot tonight when he spoke to the media. And I asked him, how long does the what I was getting at was, how long can you evaluate before you have to decide, are you going up or are you going down? And I don't blame him for not having an answer, because I didn't expect an answer. But the answer was kind of, well, we'll have to wait and see. If the rest of the league continues to be this tightly packed, then it probably gets harder to make moves. And if they don't, then obviously, what did he say? He said he talked to half the general managers in the league over the last week.
He said 2/3.
Yeah.
So
that's a lot more than I thought.
20,
yeah.
Just to ballpark it.
Yeah. And the World Juniors are coming up. He mentioned that as a place where everybody gathers in one spot. It becomes easier. So, it could go either way. And I sort of hoped that we would get more clarity after tonight, but I don't think we necessarily did.
I think you said it gets harder, which is correct. And it also gets more expensive, right? If the parity continues, because the number of sellers are less, the number of teams that may just fancy themselves contenders or might value a playoff berth and playoff experience for their group gets bigger, which means more people looking to get players added to their team, and as such, a higher price to pay to do it. Adding the second helps in maybe two ways. One, you can just move that pick if you want, or maybe it makes you feel more comfortable moving your first round pick. That is, if you were a playoff team 15 spots sooner, so maybe that helps there. But yeah, it's just, I agree that it doesn't lead to much clarity. Clearly the Kings are looking at stuff. But it sounds like they're in a group of probably 20 teams that are looking at stuff, right? There's a lot of teams looking at stuff right now, and certainly not going to be another move today. And there's not going to be another move for 8 days? The holiday
freeze kicks in. Yeah.
The team we're looking at right now is the team we're looking at for a minimum of 3 games. And then I'm going to guess, as you said, right, the evaluation and the monitoring continues.
Yeah. And, it didn't wind up mattering. It didn't wind up happening. The deadline will have passed by the time another trade can happen. But if teams want to make a salary retention trade, they have to, in order to do it twice, right? Which would be in order to bring a third team in to facilitate a trade. So if somebody wanted to trade a player with salary retention to another team, and then that team were to flip them immediately, that is no longer possible. You need 75 days before you can do a second retention trade on the same player. And the 75-day deadline before the trade deadline is December 21st. So it winds up not mattering, but that is also like a thing that now, okay, the Kings could make a single retention trade. They could acquire a player with 1 degree of retention, but you can't now find a third team as a broker to reduce even more. It doesn't matter, but it was the last item on a long list of things that would have made this story potentially interesting.
And the
50-player roster limit.
The 50-player roster limit. And, the new CBA, right? Like your team has to be cap compliant for the playoffs, at least your 18-player roster. So the importance of that double retention is even greater, right? Mm-hmm. Because now, if you get that, you get that player at that hit, whereas now you have to fit that full hit under the salary cap. There's no more LTIR exploitation in the playoffs, which is good.
Yeah. And again,
makes it that much harder.
Yeah. And there's all sorts of minor ripple effects to this. So for example, now they have an extra roster spot. Do they make a recall from Ontario? Do they roll with what they have, evaluate, wait to acquire a depth player? Who knows? They got that guy from St. Louis that they traded Akil Thomas to for Nikita Alexandrov.
Yeah.
Does he get recalled and you give him a shot? Does Andre Lee get recalled because he's been playing well? Ken Holland spoke about the opportunity that Alex Turcotte and Sammy Hellenius might be getting. I would argue we haven't seen a ton of interest or faith from the coaching staff to give those players a ton of responsibility this season and in past seasons. Ken Holland also mentioned Alex Laferriere. So now do we see that? Like, they've been soft opening the Alex Laferriere as center conversation for a few months now. Do we see it start to happen more regularly? There's all sorts of, just like I said, ripple effects off of this trade. I'm really shocked at this trade, to be completely honest.
It's just not what I was like. We were expecting a trade, whether it was tonight, or in 9 days or whatever.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Not the trade I thought, either. Certainly doesn't seem to be for lack of calls or lack of offers, right? Seems like he talked to a lot of teams about this player. Alex Turcotte seems to be kind of like a polarizing one for Kings fans.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm a really big Turcotte believer. The coaching staff will need to be Turcotte believers as well in order to see if he can actually be a third line center in the NHL. Like, I think he can. I actually really agreed with Ken Holland's assessment and would add that he is 56+% in the dot this year, which is a massive step forward from where he was. I think that he's been defensively good, and he hasn't scored, but like who has? And if you look at high danger chances, scoring chances, expected goals per 60, he is top 2 on the team in all 3 categories this season at 5-on-5. So maybe if he can be given the role that Ken Holland talked about, and that requires the buy-in of Jim Hiller and the staff, they have to play him. They can't play him 8 minutes and evaluate whether he can be a third line center. That's not fair or adequate. He has to be given, 12 to 14 minutes. He has to be able to play that role. I agree with you that I think he could kill penalties if given the opportunity, and he's clearly shown he can win faceoffs. I'm a big Turcotte fan. I think he works his bag off. I think he gives you everything he has, and I think there is untapped offense in there. But the only way we're going to know is if he plays in a top 9 role for long enough for us to get a feel for whether he can be or not. And there aren't exactly a ton of goals to replace, right? Like there's upside.
There's no goals, which Ken Holland pointed out.
But there's a lot of other stuff, right? Like I don't want to dog on Phil at all.
No,
that dude has brought a ton to this team.
That's the part that fascinates me. When Phil Danault was signed initially, the rhetoric from the peanut choir or the peanut gallery, whatever the phrase is he only scored 5 goals last year, talking about his previous final year in Montreal. And then, I can't remember if he scored, 27 goals his first year in LA, then 18, then 17, last year only 8, and then this year none. So, I mean, the goals have been decreasing, but he obviously did more than just score goals. And listen, winning faceoffs is one of those things. Killing penalties had previously been one of those things. I was kind of shocked to learn. I knew that his minutes on the PK were reduced this year. I didn't realize they had been reduced so far.
And it kind of went, I think he was more involved early, right? And then it seemed like they once they started
on the power
really
play, right? Like he started on the power play, but has subsequently been moved off the power play. What I would love to know, and I don't know that we'll ever know, is his removal from the power play, if I'm not mistaken, coincides with the rumors of his asking for a trade. And, I said to plenty of people who raised the issue, it's entirely possible that Ken Holland mentioned he had the stomach flu at home against Calgary, the stomach flu. And then, obviously whatever Quentin Byfield, like it's the flu's obviously going around. Tons of players on tons of teams have missed games. So it's entirely possible that a player could be sick and also have requested a trade, or even if the player didn't request a trade, it was clear that conversations have been going on for a while.
Seemed that, I don't think he didn't say the player requested a trade, but it was clear that both sides were amenable to finding a new home, right? Like,
yes.
So maybe if clearly conversations were had.
He didn't say that the player requested a trade. I was debating, rephrasing the question for a more direct line, because he was directly asked, did the player request a trade? And he gave an answer that to me suggests clearly there was. I mean, we've heard all the reports, and then what he said was he spoke to Alan Walsh and he spoke to Phil Danault about Phil's role. The role had been reduced, all the reasons. So I'm just like, yeah, okay, that's clearly what happened. My curiosity is, is that perhaps why, when the power play changed, it changed the way it did? Because Phil Danault had been the second unit center previously in the season when they had when they had changed personnel on the top units. Anyway, it's like I said, there's a million questions that come out of this. I'm not sure that we have a ton of answers, which makes this conversation kind of disappointing. But
sure.
Yeah, now the biggest question now is, was that the final alteration to the forward core, or will that pick be used to acquire a roster replacement for Phil Danault?
And equally as important, will the cap space, right, and the spot in the top 9 be used to do that? Because the Kings had plenty of picks, right? They already had an extra third, an extra sixth, plus all of their picks, all their future picks. So like they have assets, no doubt about it. Especially draft picks. I mean, the prospect pool isn't what it was. There's kind of top end guys, and then a bit of a gap, and then the flyer type prospects, but they have a lot of picks. So if they want to make a move, and having looked at Ken Holland's history, it's usually picks that he prefers to trade as opposed to players, from my experience. However, this is also his first year here, so he didn't draft the bulk of this team. So that might go out the window. If the Kings want to make a move, they have a lot of pieces with which to do so. They clearly have to score more goals.
Yes,
whether
that's another thing Ken Holland said repeatedly.
They clearly have to score more goals. And look, there's not one dude they're going to get who is going to just magically make score more goals. They have to get that guy, and the guys who are here still have to score more, right? Like, there's no doubt about it that if you look in the top 9, other than Adrian Kempe, you could probably say you have 8 guys scoring below expectation. And even Kempe is maybe at what you might expect, not exceeding it. So like, you can make a trade, and I think there's a lot of merit to suggest the Kings should add in that area, but the guys who are here also have to start scoring more goals. And that's not something a trade is magically going to fix. Because even last year, right, we talk about how Kuzmenko came in and jump-started everything. The Kings were still a top 10 5-on-5 scoring team before Kuzmenko got here. It was just the power play was terrible. Yeah. Then the power play came around, and the 5-on-5 got better, but the Kings were a top 10 5-on-5 team last year pre-Kuzmenko. Right now, they're a bottom 3 team, and they're a bottom 3 team in a lot of different ways offensively, so they have to find ways to score more goals internally, and if they find a way to do it externally, sure.
I will say this, as much as I like Phil Danault, the player, and I want to stress the player, I did think that the line of Moore, Turcotte, and Kuzmenko was a lot better than if you had asked me 5 games ago how that combination of players would have performed, I probably would have, done the hand wiggle that sort of says like, so, whatever. I think they've been really good. I actually really like that combination.
The one I thought I would like was Fiala, Turcotte, Moore, and I did like that, but I thought that they looked good together, the 3 of them. And it's like 3 dudes. You're like, why would you do that?
Right.
Like, that's not like, why would you, what are those guys going to have in common? And then it was like, oh, they looked really good. Like, I thought 12 was really good.
What I would love to see is, in the past, I have thought that the 2 Alexes, Laferriere and Turcotte, have looked good together. And I've thought that Moore and Turcotte have looked good together.
Or Moore. Yeah.
So I would love to see Moore, Turcotte, and Laferriere as a line.
I agree. I like Turcotte and Laferriere together. I like Laferriere with
just about everybody.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Like, you could move him around anywhere and he's going to look good. But Turcotte, Laferriere, I mean, they played together for a stretch, right? Like, I remember them playing together last year and playing well.
Yeah, no, they looked good.
But I could see Moore working there too.
Yeah, well, to me, like I said, I just want to see it because I've liked 12 and 15 together, and I've liked 15 and 14 together. And so you go, all right, well, let's try 12, 15, and 14 at the same time. Haven't seen it.
Also then you can then put Kuzmenko back on that.
Yeah.
Right. And then you have 3 lines that you're like, okay, this has worked before. This has worked before. And this in our heads works because these two guys work and these two guys work. I like that.
The real, I mean, and I sort of hinted at it in the question I asked Ken Holland, and I think he answered the question I was asking, which is now it sort of is, that's up to Jim Hiller to see whether or not Jim Hiller likes the combos, wants to experiment with the combos. And we know Jim Hiller likes to experiment. So now the question is, can he, with the remaining pieces, or if they recall somebody from Ontario or make another trade, can he find chemistry? Can he combine the pieces to make something new? Because, what we said at the beginning of the season was the balance that they had at the end of last year, that 9 forward lineup that worked so well after the Kuzmenko trade, for whatever reasons, it clearly wasn't working this year. Some of it was injury. Fogel got hurt for, a few games. Kopitar got hurt. Perry wasn't there, even though I know he's not in the top 9. But there were injury issues. But then obviously Kuzmenko was benched a few games here and there. And so everything was jumbled. And they still haven't found a workable offensive chemistry. And we're 30-something games into, 33 games into the season. Yeah. And it's worked out for the Kings for now that the league is so jumbled. Ken Holland said, if we're in a malaise, then everybody's in a malaise, which was a cute line. But the stratification is starting to happen. The teams that are out in front have continued to jump out in front. Colorado just keeps getting further ahead of everybody else.
Yep.
And Dallas and Carolina and Minnesota keep going with them. And obviously Minnesota made the trade they made. And then at the bottom of the league, you're starting to see, okay, Seattle, Nashville, Vancouver made the trade, so they're not likely to hang around. Calgary is rumored to be making a lot of trades. So there are a lot of teams that are at the bottom that are either making it harder on themselves to move up, or just, it like the Toronto Maple Leafs. Yeah, they're only a few points out of a playoff spot, but there's 5 teams in between them and a playoff spot. Mm-hmm. So everybody's in a malaise for now, but it seems like more and more teams are sorting out how they want to react to it. And to your point earlier, that'll just make things more expensive if you don't move quickly.
And you don't want to limp into the playoffs in a malaise, right? You gotta,
yes,
and look, the defensive stuff is always going to be there. It's been there all year. But you can't win every game 2-1, and the Kings are going to have to score more goals to win more games. I think we both agreed at the beginning of the year, and I know that I was dead wrong about this. Was the best way for this team to be successful this year was for the top 9 that worked so well last year to keep working well.
Yeah.
And there was no reason to suggest that it wouldn't, but it clearly hasn't, and what's going to work right now is now 100% going to have to be different because one of those players no longer plays here.
Right. Yeah.
So that right there.
For the record, I don't think you were wrong. It just didn't happen. You were right. The best way forward was for what was working last year to work this year. It just didn't.
It just didn't, for sure.
That's, for whatever reason.
Yeah.
A ton of questions. Now, unfortunately, you don't ever get to do a media availability with the player that did get traded, because I'd love to ask Phil Danault a bunch of questions about the last week or so. Practice will be interesting. I imagine Jim Hiller will be thank God they don't have a game till Monday, because there's a bunch of questions that will be asked that will have nothing to do with Monday's opponent.
Tomorrow feels like a sitting down press conference.
Yeah. So definitely a locker room 10. Yeah, definitely not a stick room press conference for sure. And we'll see what the attendance is like. I imagine we'll see some faces we don't ordinarily see at practice.
Might not just be you, me, and the people who work for the team.
Right. Yeah.
Which is the typical attendance.
Honestly, nobody cares about this but you and me, but that might be the most little boxes I've ever seen on a Zoom call since COVID. That was a lot. That was
a lot of little boxes.
There's a ton of faces on Zoom. All right, let me just go through my notes here real quick and see if there isn't anything we covered. Holland said he spoke to Walsh about the need or no need for Danault to go to Florida. Andrew asked about Turcotte and Hellenius, whether or not there would be another deal pending. Ken Holland said maybe. Dennis asked what changed. Did Danault request a trade? Ken Holland mentioned the fact that Armia and Perry's addition to the lineup might have also played a role in the reduction of Phil Danault's ice time. And I thought that was interesting because even though neither of them are centers, Armia does kill penalties and Perry did get power play time, and that does impact time on ice. So I thought that was interesting.
And I think Armia too has been trusted in like late game situations, and Perry the other way. Like when they're down, Perry's finding himself on the ice because he's a net front guy, and Armia, when you're up a goal, is finding himself on the ice. So I think, and it's not like he's down 5 minutes a game, right? It was I think it's a minute and a half, 2 minutes, like. But those little things do add up. I did find that interesting as well, especially because like those guys weren't brought in to eat into Phil Danault's ice time.
Right.
They were they were brought in. They're not. I guess they were, but it was more in a like playing the fourth line more way, not in a.
But also, like I expected that the number one penalty killing pair that Ken Holland talked about would have been Danault and Armia. It wasn't. And the end result is that neither of them got nearly the amount of playing time on the penalty kill that I would have anticipated. And Phil Danault got a severe reduction in time.
Yeah.
Ken said, if we're in a malaise, the whole league's in a malaise. They've got to be better at home. Been in a lot of low scoring games. We talked about the offense. Alex Turcotte will get more playing time. The roster freeze was brought up, whether or not this was, but you mentioned that Ken Holland said if the trade did not happen today, Ken Holland had spoken to Phil Danault and Alan Walsh, and everybody was fine with, it wasn't like it wasn't like a get me out of here right now. It wasn't a Patrick Roy in 1996. I played my final game for you kind of situation.
Phil would have been on the ice tomorrow, right? And,
yes,
he probably would have been the one answering the questions after tomorrow's practice if he was there.
That
would have been an interesting one.
Yeah. So I mean I think we covered all the talking points that were brought up in the press conference. And like I said, more questions than answers, which is disappointing, and it's confusing for fans. I've still been getting messages. I got a bunch of text messages and calls while I was on the Zoom call, and I was getting mad at not that anybody knew that Ken Holland was talking to the media, but I wanted to respond to everybody and tell them, leave me alone. I'm just trying to listen to this.
But it's one of those that like, and it's probably going to be a little confusing until we get a resolution. Like, and that resolution could be that Alex Turcotte is a dynamo as a 3C. It could be that, man, the Kings need to get somebody else to play, whether it's that spot or somewhere else to bump other pieces around. And we're not going to know how this thing ends until it ends. And that was kind of the question you asked, right? Like, when does it end? And like, it could be 3 months, could be 2 weeks.
Yeah, well, it could be the day after the roster freeze, right? Like, the rosters can't be changed, but the general managers are allowed to talk to each other.
He could acquire somebody tomorrow. They just can't.
Yeah, right. They just can't announce it until the 29th or whatever it is.
There's one more thing.
Yeah.
Oh, you go ahead.
I was going to say, the thing looming over all of this for me, and I hadn't really, I mean, I knew that I thought about it, but it hadn't been crystallized for me until I was watching TikTok the other night, just wasting time. And this random video came on, and the intro, and it grabbed me right away, was NHL teams that betrayed players. And I was like, oh, well, that's dramatic. And they talked about the Ducks and Ryan Getzlaf's final season. And they talked about, I can see from the look on your face, you're curious about that. I made the same face when I was watching it. Basically what they said was Getzlaf thought he was sticking around to give the Ducks another shot at competitiveness. And halfway through the season, they pivoted and just started selling off pieces. And the end result is that Getzlaf didn't play the final 2 home games. And it was kind of a bad end to his career as a Duck. And I thought, oh, I didn't remember that because I don't care about the Ducks, but I suppose. But I thought, okay, this is Anze Kopitar's final season. And while I certainly don't think the Kings necessarily, quote unquote, owe him anything, as a fan, I want the team to want to give him the best chance to have as good an ending as possible, however that plays out. And so that's part of the reason I guess I expected a roster player, and some of the fake trades I've come up with in my mind, like who would you get? All involved roster players. The theory in my head was always, okay, we'll strengthen the team for this year. We can worry about the future in the summer, which I know contradicts some of the stuff I've said in the past, but I do think it's important to have nice stories, as silly as that sounds.
I agree. That's certainly the trade I would have expected, right? Because when
Yeah.
you're going through it, you're like, even just for cap reasons, you're like,
Yeah.
it's a big number. You think someone's coming back. You think of where the Kings are at. Malays or no, they're not being like, well, we're not going to win this year. Like
You're
they are
right.
still like they haven't
Yeah.
changed their focus. So yeah, I agree with you. It is a little surprising. I guess you also have to. You can only take what you're offered, right? And
Yes.
if the best move is to get a second now and add somebody else later, even if it looks and feels weird in the moment, then I guess that's the risk or the move he has to try to make. Or you have to gut it out with the guy you have, right? You have to be like, look, Phil, you have to stay
Yeah.
until we can find something different. And I don't know what the right move is. It's not the move I expected either. Um, it's also, I guess, a little higher than I might have thought if it was a draft pick only
Oh,
for
really? That's funny.
someone with no
I
goals.
was, yeah. Well, yeah.
But also, and his number, it was as much the number as anything. Like you usually think, oh,
You
well,
mean
a
the
guy who's coming in
salary
to be,
number?
yeah, the salary
Yeah.
number. But I wasn't thinking pick until
No,
hearing about it.
I would have angrily, I did angrily argue with people earlier today that the trades available were limited because you would need a roster player back, and the roster player, the money would have to match, and the term would have to be somewhere in the same. You know what I mean? Like there were all these conditions that would have had to be met for it to be a quote
Yeah.
unquote reasonable trade, and then they go ahead and make me look like a total idiot by trading for a pick. Yeah, I totally, I was about to say something and I totally lost my train of thought. Yeah, I didn't expect this. It caught me totally off guard.
Yeah.
So I mean, I will say this. We didn't have a ton of track record on how Ken Holland moves as a general manager. I would argue we now have the start of a pretty solid body of work to suggest that he moves as quietly as Rob Blake did.
Yeah.
Because there was,
Quietly, but I think quicker.
yes, but like nobody, I mean, there were rumblings that Danault might go back to Montreal, but I feel like those rumblings were all pretty surface level. Like he played in Montreal. He's obviously from Quebec, like, but I didn't see anybody. I mean, I guess there were some reports that
And
they
at
had
the end of the
talked
day, the
to.
teams broke the trade. It wasn't,
Yeah,
like
right.
the teams had the trade before, a
Yeah,
national
right. Elliot
insider.
Friedman or Darren Dreger, or
Yeah.
any of those guys. Bob McKenzie didn't airdrop in from retirement to announce it. So like I said, it's a, between that and the Spence trade. Well, I guess the Akil Thomas trade. So now we've had 3 trades in the Ken Holland tenure as GM of the Kings.
Yep, Spence, the Akil Thomas, and
Phil Danault. And at no point was there ever any advance notice, really, that came from quote unquote insiders.
Yeah.
And I will say the one thing, this is the train of thought that I lost a second ago. It seems to me that while Danault would have been on the ice tomorrow and Ken Holland said they had discussed it and perfectly fine for him to play the next game, it seems to me that given that this trade did happen tonight, it seems like it probably had reached a point where it was untenable for him to stay.
Probably for the long haul, right?
Yeah, because otherwise, why do it today? Why not just wait for the trade freeze to be over? And
I think it could have lasted 3 games.
Yeah.
Like the freeze, right? Like they could have negotiated it during the freeze and made the trade after, but
it seems pretty clear that both parties were interested in this happening, and so it happened. All right, I think that's basically all we've got to say about the trade and the media and what we know for sure as of right now. Zach Dooley, thank you very much for joining me.
I had one more thing I wanted to work in.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I do think it is important when you talk about Phil to mention the impact that he had on the 21-22 team.
Oh,
when I think back,
absolutely,
about Phil.
Sure, yeah.
I just think of like when I was writing the story today, I was just thinking of like, how do I remember Phil as a King? And it's not going to be a 0 goal guy in 2025. It's going to be the culture shift that he, I think, was a huge factor in bringing here in 21-22.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that team makes the playoffs without Phil. I don't think that the team is nearly as successful without Phil. So while, like I truly understand the reasons for today for both sides, I do want to, like, I just thought that he was so impactful, especially in that first year, both on and off the ice at, you used to, I think it was like the power of friendship, you called it. I think
Yep.
he was a big driver of the power of friendship, dating all the way back to that first podcast we did with him when he signed.
100%.
With the right culture, you can achieve
Yeah, you can
anything.
beat anybody. Yeah.
You can beat anybody. And like that team had zero business being in game 7. They probably had zero business being in the playoffs at all when you look back at that roster.
Yeah.
I think he was a huge part of why that team overachieved. And he should be remembered, in my opinion, for that year.
I agree with you 100%, obviously, and I'm glad you said it, because I feel like if I said it, I'd just be repeating myself. But yeah, I genuinely believe that 21-22 team was successful because of 2 lines, Arvidsson, Danault, and Moore, and weirdly enough, Lizotte, Lemieux, and Kaliev. And geez, how many of those guys are gone now? 5 of those 6 guys are gone.
Just Trevor Moore, right?
Yeah, Trevor Moore's the only one left. But yeah, the first interview we did with Phil Danault after he signed that free agent contract, and he said, with the right culture, we can beat anybody. And I fell in love with him right then and there.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think, and that's the biggest question I think looming over all of this is, how does culture survive when it loses its greatest champion? And we'll see, we'll find out. So
we'll find out.
Yep. Thanks for joining me, Zach. Appreciate it. And thanks for listening, everybody.